Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. On the morning she planned to humiliate her husband in court, Naomi Grant dressed for triumph. She slid diamond studs into her ears, fastened a slim gold bracelet at her wrist, and smoothed the lapels of a tailored white suit in the mirror. Her reflection smiled back with the confidence of someone who believed the story was already over and that she had won. For 6 months, she had told anyone who would listen that her husband was broke, pathetic, finished. Today, she told herself, would be the day the world saw it with their own eyes. Outside, the Texas heat shimmered against the marble of the Travis County Courthouse in Austin. Naomi stepped out of the black rideshare at the bottom of the stairs and inhaled slowly, letting the sight of the wide stone steps and tall glass doors feed her sense of victory. Her mother, Clarice, waited near the entrance in a pale blue dress and a strand of pearls that clicked softly when she moved. Beside her stood Jared Pierce, Naomi's lover and her husband's former business partner, adjusting his gold cuff links with the relaxed arrogance of a man who believed he had landed on the winning side of a war. "You look like a woman finally free," Clarice said, kissing Naomi's cheek. "This is the beginning of your real life." "I told you it would end like this," Naomi replied, letting her smile sharpen. "Wesley never had the stomach for real success. He is not built for the life I want." Jared leaned in, his cologne faint but deliberate. "Bet he shows up late," Jared said under his breath. "If he shows up at all, he probably cannot afford gas." Naomi laughed, loud enough for Clarice to hear, quiet enough that the courthouse clerk at the door only glanced for a second. "If he does come, he will look exactly like what he is, tired and defeated. I almost feel sorry for him." The sound that answered her did not belong to defeat. It began as a low mechanical purr at the bottom of the courthouse steps, a deep engine growl that rolled through the humid air and made even the security officers at the door glance toward the street. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom slid to the curb with the effortless grace of something that never had to ask for space. Its paint gleamed like liquid glass under the Austin sun. A uniformed driver stepped out, circled the car, and opened a rear door with practiced precision. A polished shoe touched the ground first. Then the man Naomi had spent half a year tearing down stepped into view. Wesley Grant, the husband she told everyone was broke. He looked nothing like ruin. Wesley wore a navy suit cut so perfectly it seemed to settle onto his frame rather than hang from it. A silver watch with a deep blue face rested against his wrist, catching the light every time he moved his hand. His hair, once slightly unkempt from long nights at the office, was trimmed and sharp. His posture was relaxed, shoulders loose, chin level, like a man who had nothing to chase and nothing to prove. The security guard at the door straightened. "Good morning, Mr. Grant," he said with the kind of automatic respect that is only reserved for people whose names matter. Naomi's smile faltered so quickly it almost looked like a glitch. "He rented that," she hissed under her breath, eyes locked on the Rolls-Royce as if she could will it into disappearing. Clarice's fan slowed in midair. Maybe his lawyer insisted, Clarice said weakly, but she did not believe it either. Jared's throat tightened. He remembered the last time he saw Wesley hunched over a laptop in the old office, asking for a temporary loan to keep servers running for one more month. The man walking up the steps now did not look like someone who needed help. He looked like someone who signed paychecks. Wesley's gaze swept across the three of them. No anger, no smirk, just a calm, measured look that lingered on Naomi for half a heartbeat before moving on. It was the kind of composure that made guilt itch under expensive fabric. A clerk at the door scanned the docket. "Mr. Grant, courtroom 3A. "Thank you," Wesley said, his voice even. He nodded once and walked past Naomi, so close that she caught the clean, expensive note of his cologne, the same spot on his neck she used to tuck her face into when he came home late. She stood frozen for a split second, feeling like the entire courthouse had tilted under her heels. "He must think pretending fixes failure," Naomi said, forcing a laugh that sounded too sharp. "Once everything is divided, we will see how long that act lasts." The laugh did not land. Even Clarice did not echo it. As they followed him inside, Naomi's heels clicked harder than she intended against the tiled floor. What had begun as a victory lap now felt like walking into a test she had not studied for. Courtroom 3A was cool and bright, the air conditioning humming softly above, the rows of benches already half filled with curious faces and 2 local reporters checking their cameras. At the respondents' table, Wesley sat down, fingers resting lightly on a black notebook with worn edges and a single elastic band holding it closed. Naomi saw that notebook and felt a small, unwelcome ripple of memory. He had carried that thing everywhere. At first she had thought it was endearing, then ridiculous. "You and that little journal," she had said more than once. The judge entered a few minutes later, a firm-faced man in his 60s with a precise haircut and a steady gaze. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. Everyone rose, then sat. Wesley's expression did not change. Naomi leaned toward Jared. "Why is he so calm?" she whispered. Jared did not answer immediately. He watched Wesley's profile, the relaxed jaw, the easy breath, and felt a slow unease crawl up his spine. "Maybe he finally got good at acting," Jared muttered, though he did not sound convinced. Outside, the Rolls-Royce waited in the sunlight like a silent promise. Inside, the air thickened around old memories, unfinished arguments, and a revenge story that had started long before the court date printed on the docket. A year earlier, Austin had looked different through Naomi's eyes. The same streets, the same coffee shops, the same glass-walled co-working spaces, but painted with brighter colors in her imagination. Back then, Wesley still believed that hard work and an honest product could outlast anyone's cruelty. He and Jared had launched Apex Neural Systems, a small artificial intelligence firm wedged between a taco truck and a shared office building. Wesley handled the code, the architecture, the long nights. Jared handled charm, investors, and everything that sparkled. For a while it worked. Those were the days when Naomi would visit the office with takeout and a kiss. Wesley would be sitting at his desk in front of 3 monitors covered in cascading lines of code, dark circles under his eyes, and a shy smile on his face when she walked in. "You should come home earlier," Naomi would say, setting the food down. "Your dinner tastes better before midnight." Wesley would rub the back of his neck and say, "I know. I am close. 1 more week and the prototype will be stable. After that, I can breathe." She believed him at first. Believed in the way his mind worked. Believed in the plans scribbled in the black notebook he carried from home to office and back again. But belief was easy when everything still felt like a movie montage and not a ledger. Then funding dried up. A major investor pulled out after market downturn. Another decided to pivot to a different sector, and suddenly Apex Neural Systems was a small company with big ideas and no oxygen. Rent doubled. Server costs climbed. The world did not slow down to let them catch their breath. Naomi began to sense the walls closing in. She watched her friends post photos from rooftop bars, vacations, and new homes while she sat at their modest dining table paying bills that barely balanced. She calculated her future with the quiet panic of someone terrified of becoming ordinary. One evening, Wesley came home with his shoulders slumped, tie loosened, holding a bag of takeout instead of the flowers he used to bring. The apartment smelled of reheated leftovers and the faint trace of the candles Naomi had stopped lighting. "I talked to Jared," Wesley said, setting the bag down. "He is confident we can restructure. We might need to scale back, but we're not done. I just need a little more time." Naomi did not look up from her phone. "Time does not pay rent," she replied. "Hope does not clear debt, Wesley. I told you we cannot survive on dreams." He swallowed hard. "We are close. I can feel it. One contract changes everything. I just need—" "No," Naomi cut in, finally raising her eyes. "You need to accept that you are not that man. You are kind, and you are smart, but you're not a leader. You do not have the instinct for big money. And I am not going to drown with you because you refuse to see that." He stood there for a moment, then walked quietly to the small desk in the corner where the black notebook waited. He opened it, picked up his pen, and wrote something slowly, his hand steady. "What are you writing now?" she asked, irritation sharp in her voice. "It keeps me sane," Wesley said without looking up. One day, this will remind me who changed when money left the room. You sound dramatic, Naomi muttered, but the sentence lodged somewhere in the back of her mind. A few weeks later, Jared started visiting their home more often. He arrived with expensive wine, charm smoothed over like polished stone, and business updates wrapped in empathy. When Wesley was at the office trying to salvage contracts, Jared sat at Naomi's kitchen table listening while she poured out her frustrations. "He is brilliant, Naomi," Jared said, rolling up his sleeves as if he belonged there. "But brilliance does not always translate to leadership. He is not built for confrontation. He thinks ethics will always be enough. The market does not work that way. Then why partner with him?" Naomi asked, crossing her arms. "Because I thought I could balance him," Jared replied. "But he does not listen when it matters. Someone needs to do what is necessary." The attention felt like oxygen after months of living in a house full of tense silence and unspoken resentment. Jared did not touch her hand at first. He did not have to. His words did the reaching. Then came the meeting that shifted everything. Wesley and Jared sat across from two venture capitalists in a conference room with glass walls and a fake plant in the corner. Naomi sat near the end of the table, a notebook open in front of her even though she wrote nothing, trying to look supportive and neutral at the same time. "We like the product," one investor said, tapping a pen against a folder. "We see potential, but we cannot put serious money into this unless there's a clear leadership structure. Technical founders are often complicated. We can clarify leadership," Jared said quickly. "Wesley can focus on product development and research. I will handle operations, investors, and external partnerships." "So the chief technology officer remains," the other investor said, nodding toward Wesley. "But the company needs a chief executive officer with a clearer profile." The words were wrapped in polite phrasing, but Wesley heard what they meant. "You're good enough to build it, but not good enough to steer it." "That is not negotiable," the first investor added. "It is business, nothing personal." Wesley felt Naomi's eyes on him, waiting to see whether he would argue or fold. He glanced down at his black notebook resting by his elbow. The pages inside held diagrams, ideas, and private thoughts no one had ever seen. Slowly, he closed it. "If it keeps the company alive, we can test this structure," Wesley said quietly. Naomi exhaled, relieved. "See," she told him later in the car. "Jared is helping. You should be grateful. For once, someone is doing what you cannot." "Jared is helping himself," Wesley replied, staring out the window at the Austin skyline. "I built something worth stealing. That is all." "There you go being dramatic again," Naomi said. "You are lucky he believes in you at all." He did not argue. He had learned that arguments with her rarely ended with understanding. He simply went home, opened his notebook, and wrote 4 words on a blank page. "Trust eyes," very quietly. Over the next few months, documents began to slide across his desk. Restructuring agreements, revised equity charts, updated bylaws. Jared's email signature started including the title, Acting Chief Executive Officer. Wesley's profile faded from the company website. Hidden inside one of those restructuring contracts, nestled between paragraphs about responsibilities and contingencies, Wesley added a clause that no one in the room looked at twice. All proprietary software and related code created by Wesley Grant shall remain his personal intellectual property and cannot be transferred, sold, or assigned without his written consent. When he placed the final draft in front of Jared, Jared skimmed it quickly, eyes hunting for the sections that applied to his raised salary and new title. "We good?" Jared asked, pen already in hand. "Better than you think," Wesley said. A month later, Naomi stood in their bedroom watching Wesley pack a small overnight bag. She had stopped asking where he was going when he left late at night. Resentment had numbed her curiosity. "Do not stay out all night again," she said, keeping her tone flat. "The children notice." "I will be back before breakfast," Wesley answered. He looked tired in a way that went deeper than his eyes. He kissed each of their 3 children goodnight, lingering a little longer than usual, pressing his lips to their foreheads as if memorizing their warmth. Naomi barely glanced up from her phone when he walked out. "You cannot fix this marriage by sulking," she called after him. He did not reply. Outside, the night air was thick and warm. Wesley slid into his old sedan, placed the black notebook on the passenger seat, and drove toward the edge of the city where the bus station waited. He did not tell anyone where he was going. He turned his phone off at the first red light. The overnight bus to San Francisco was nearly empty. Wesley sat by the window, notebook open on his lap, watching the dark highway slip past as Texas turned into desert and desert into the glow of another state. On one page, he wrote a single line. This is not running. This is repositioning. By the time the bus rolled into San Francisco, fog draped over the bay like a slow-moving secret. Wesley stepped onto the sidewalk with 2 suitcases and the notebook, feeling like he had stripped his life down to its bones. He rented a small studio above a noodle shop where the walls sweated steam and the ceiling leaked when it rained. He spent his mornings jogging along the waterfront, watching the towers of glass and steel that housed companies similar to the one he had just left. In the afternoons and nights, he sat at an old desk in the studio and wrote code, reworking old algorithms into something sharper and stronger. He lived on instant coffee, takeout, and determination. It was at a small cafe near Market Street that he ran into Elaine Morris, the widow of his late mentor, Dr. Robert Morris. She was sitting near the window with a book when she saw him at the counter and frowned in recognition. "Wesley," Elaine called, rising from her chair. "I thought you were still in Texas. You look like you have not slept in 3 months." Wesley gave a tired smile. "I have not slept properly in longer than that," he admitted. "I needed a change of scenery." Elaine studied him for a moment. "Robert used to come home looking like that," she said quietly. "He would say genius feels less like a gift and more like a bruise some days. You were his favorite student." "He was the only person who ever told me my ideas were not too much," Wesley replied. "Sometimes I hear his voice when I write." "Then come here where he worked," Elaine said. "The lab has been sitting still since he passed. It is a shame. He hated stillness." The lab sat behind a converted warehouse, filled with old prototypes, dusty monitors, and shelves of equipment that had not been touched in years. The first time Elaine flicked on the lights, the room hummed weakly, as if waking from a long sleep. For 6 months, that lab became Wesley's entire world. Elaine handled quiet introductions to investors and contacts who owed Robert favors. Wesley built in silence and intensity, sleeping 3 hours a night, rewriting and refining a security platform he called Vanguard Sentinel, software designed to predict and neutralize cyber intrusions before they happened. "You need a team," Elaine told him one evening, leaning against the door frame while he stared at lines of code. "I need this to exist first," Wesley answered. "No one touches a line until I am finished." When the prototype finally lit the monitors with real-time simulations, catching and stopping test attacks before they could land, Elaine covered her mouth with one hand. "He would be proud," she whispered, referring to Robert. "I'm not doing this for pride," Wesley said quietly. "I'm doing this so the people who tried to erase me have to say my name again." Word spread faster than he expected. A conglomerate that owned several technology firms, including the one that had quietly absorbed Jared's company, sent representatives to evaluate Vanguard Sentinel. Wesley sat through the demonstrations with his arms folded, letting the software speak. Within weeks, Vanguard Technologies, the company Elaine helped him incorporate, signed an acquisition deal worth $380 million. Wesley retained a controlling stake, the role of chief technology officer, and a permanent board seat. He signed the papers with the same pen Jared once gifted him as a symbol of partnership. The first thing he bought was not a mansion or a yacht. He walked into a showroom filled with polished vehicles and paused in front of a black Rolls-Royce Phantom. The salesperson began a rehearsed pitch. "I know what it is," Wesley said. "I will take it." He parked the car in the underground garage of a new downtown apartment building and left it there for days, almost afraid to drive it. Success felt strange on his shoulders after so many months of being called a failure. Then, late one evening, he opened his email and saw a message from the Travis County Court. "Final divorce hearing scheduled." He closed the laptop slowly, looked at his reflection in the window, and breathed out once. "Perfect timing," he said to himself. When he told Elaine about the hearing, she stood beside him at the bay window of the lab, watching fog roll in. "You have already won," she said. "This is not about winning," Wesley replied. It is about clarity. I want the truth on record. He slid the black notebook into his bag. Tucked inside was a folded sheet of hospital paperwork he had requested months earlier, one that listed the blood types of his 3 children. Under his oldest son's name, the form read type O positive. Wesley's own records said type B. He had not spoken a word about that discrepancy to anyone. Not yet. Back in Austin, Naomi spent the 6 months leading up to the hearing telling the same story again and again. At salons, brunch tables, and online posts, she called Wesley a coward who ran away when life became difficult. She called him broke. She told her friends that she had rescued herself and their children from a man who would have dragged them into ruin. When this is over, he will sign whatever I put in front of him, Naomi told Clarice one afternoon as they sat in a boutique trying on dresses. He needs my permission to see the children. He needs to contribute to tuition, to health care, to everything. He owes us. Child support is the least he can do, Clarice answered. You carried those children. You managed that house while he chased dreams. Now he can finally pay for the reality. Naomi never asked herself why the surprise deposits that had been appearing in the joint account over the past 2 months had no label and no clear origin. She assumed they were advances from Jared's new connections. The idea that they might have come from Wesley's own success never crossed her mind. The day of the hearing, as she stood on the courtroom steps in her white suit, she imagined Wesley arriving in a faded shirt with a cheap attorney, begging the judge for leniency. Instead, the black Rolls-Royce had appeared, and everything she thought she knew shifted a few inches to the left. Now, back in the present, she sat at the petitioner's table, clutching the edge of the polished wood as the judge looked down at the file in front of him. Her attorney, a carefully groomed man named Victor Barnes, rose with an easy smile. Your Honor, Victor began, my client, Mrs. Naomi Grant, has maintained primary custody of the couple's 3 minor children for the past 6 months. She seeks a fair division of marital assets and appropriate child support, including contributions toward private school tuition and health care. Naomi sat taller, turning her head slightly so the nearby reporters could see the clean line of her jaw and the controlled set of her mouth. Wesley's attorney, an older man named Thomas Avery, stood slowly. Your Honor, Thomas said, before we address any financial obligations or custody arrangements, my client respectfully requests court-ordered paternity testing for all 3 minors. The sentence dropped into the room like a stone into still water. For 3 full seconds, no one moved. Then the whispers began in the gallery, low and sharp. Naomi's chair scraped back. Absolutely not, she blurted, her voice too loud. He is trying to embarrass me. This is a stunt. Victor turned toward her, eyes wide. Naomi, he whispered, do not speak without my direction. Thomas remained calm. Your Honor, he continued, we have reason to believe that the minors may not be Mr. Grant's biological children. There are documented inconsistencies in medical records, including blood type documentation. Before the court imposes long-term financial obligations, the biological facts must be established. The judge narrowed his eyes and flipped through the pages Thomas had handed up. His gaze paused on a hospital record. He compared it to another sheet. His jaw tightened. Mrs. Grant, the judge said slowly, do you have any objections supported by evidence as to why this court should not order testing? Naomi felt her throat close. He is doing this to hurt me, she said, her voice shaking. He is vindictive. We have 3 children together. Everyone knows that. Knowing and proving are not the same, the judge replied. He tapped his pen against the bench once. The motion for paternity testing is granted. All financial rulings regarding child support are suspended until results are received. The court will reconvene once the certified report is filed. The gavel came down with a single, hard strike. Reporters surged toward the aisle as soon as they were allowed to move. Cameras flashed. Someone whispered, did you hear that? 3 children. Another voice muttered, if he is not the father, then who is? Naomi turned slowly to Jared, her pulse pounding in her ears. Her fingers dug into the sleeve of his jacket. You told me no one would ever find out, she whispered. Jared's eyes widened. Why would you say that out loud? He hissed, pulling his arm away. But the damage was done. Victor closed his eyes briefly, as if he could erase the last 10 seconds. Wesley rose, picked up his black notebook, and walked past them without looking down. At the doorway, he paused, turned his head just enough for Naomi to see his profile, and said in a low, even voice, "Truth does not humiliate people, Naomi. Lies do." Then he stepped out into the hallway. By the next morning, every major local network had repeated the same line. A successful technology founder in Austin had requested a paternity test for his 3 children during a divorce hearing. Cameras camped outside the courthouse. Commentators speculated on talk shows over coffee. Naomi arrived for the second hearing in a black coat and large sunglasses despite the bright day, walking quickly from the parking lot with Clarice and Jared close behind. The woman who once thrived on attention now flinched every time a camera shutter clicked. "Do not answer any questions," Victor warned as they approached the doors. "Look straight ahead. Let me speak for you." Inside courtroom 3A, Wesley was already seated, his navy suit perfectly pressed, the same black notebook on the table beside him. He did not look toward Naomi when she walked in. He sat very still, hands folded, as if he had made peace with every possible outcome before stepping into the building. The clerk approached the bench carrying a sealed envelope stamped with the state's emblem. "Certified DNA results, Your Honor," she said. The judge broke the seal and read silently. The room seemed to tilt around that quiet moment. Naomi stared at his face, tried to read every small movement. Jared sat rigid, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles paled. Wesley did not blink. The judge set the papers down. "The results show 0 probability that Mr. Grant is the biological father of any of the 3 minors," he said. A collective gasp rolled through the courtroom. Naomi's chest seized. "No," she said, standing halfway, her voice cracking. "That cannot be right. There must be a mistake. Test them again." "Mrs. Grant, sit down," the judge said sharply. "The laboratory used is certified by the state. The chain of custody has been verified. The results stand." Thomas rose. "Your Honor, in light of these findings, we move to dismiss all claims for child support and legal custody. Mr. Grant should have no obligations for children who are not biologically his, particularly given the circumstances under which this case has unfolded." Victor tried to recover ground. "Your Honor, biology is not the only measure of fatherhood. Mr. Grant has acted as a father to these children for years. That bond was compromised the moment truth was hidden from him," the judge said, his patience clearly thinning. "Motion granted. All claims for child support and custody on behalf of Mrs. Grant are dismissed." Naomi's knees weakened. She steadied herself against the table. "You are leaving me with nothing," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "On the contrary," the judge replied, "you retain the assets already titled in your name. The court has also reviewed Mr. Grant's financial disclosures. His current holdings and interests in Vanguard Technologies and related entities were acquired after the date of separation and are legally classified as separate property. No spousal support is awarded." The judge signed the final page of the decree. The scratch of his pen sounded louder than the murmur behind them. "The marriage of Wesley Grant and Naomi Grant is hereby dissolved, effective immediately." The gavel struck one last time. Clarice covered her mouth with both hands, tears spilling quietly over her fingers. Jared pushed back his chair as if to escape quickly, but when he turned toward the exit, he found himself face to face with Wesley. For a brief second, the 2 men who had once called each other brother stood inches apart. Jared saw none of the pleading he had expected. No anger, no need for approval. Only a steady calm that made him feel suddenly small. "You called me a charity case once," Wesley said softly, so only Jared could hear. "You were wrong. I was an early investor in your downfall." Jared swallowed hard. "Wesley, this was never personal," he began. "You made it personal when you helped her rewrite my life," Wesley replied. "Now the numbers are simply catching up." He stepped past Jared and stopped beside Naomi's table. She was still sitting, one hand pressed flat against the cool wood, eyes glossy and lost. She looked up at him with a desperation he had not seen since the early years of their marriage. Wesley, please, she whispered. You cannot just walk away. We have history. We have children together. Even if we do not have what you think we have, he said, his tone quiet but unyielding. You chose your story. The court has simply recorded it. I made mistakes, Naomi said, voice breaking. I was scared. I did not want to be poor. I did not want to live small. I did not mean for it to go this far. You meant every word you said when you thought I would never know, Wesley answered. That is what matters. For a moment, Naomi thought she saw something soften in his face, a flicker of the man who used to fall asleep on the couch with their youngest child drooling on his shirt. But it passed. You wanted to see me crawl, Wesley said. You told people I would beg you for mercy today. Now you have seen me stand. He turned away. The reporters in the hallway surged as soon as he stepped through the doors, microphones and cameras thrust toward him like an oncoming wave. Mr. Grant, one reporter called, walking backward to keep up with his stride. What is your reaction to the court's decision? Do you feel vindicated? Wesley stopped beside the black Rolls-Royce, the sun reflecting off its hood. He looked at the reporter for a moment and said, It is not vindication. It is clarity. Do you have anything to say to your ex-wife? Another reporter shouted. Wesley considered the question, then shook his head once. No, he replied. Everything that needed to be said is in the record now. The driver opened the rear door. Wesley slid into the cool interior, the door closing with a soft thud that sounded, to him, like a period. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the courthouse steps, the noise, and the woman who had once been the center of his world. On the courthouse steps, Naomi stumbled out a few minutes later. The white suit she had chosen for victory now looked too bright under the harsh midday sun. Her hair, once perfectly smooth, had started to loosen around her face. Clarice gripped her arm to keep her steady. We will appeal, Clarice said, though even she sounded unsure. This is not the end. A judge can make mistakes. Naomi stared at the street where the Rolls-Royce had disappeared. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. I thought he would always need me, she said. I thought no matter what I did, he would still be the boy with a notebook chasing my approval. He does not look like a boy anymore, Clarice said quietly. Naomi pressed her fingers against her temples as if she could massage the day into a different shape. Cameras still watched from a distance, waiting for one last statement, one last hint of drama. She did not give it to them. Inside the black car, Wesley leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. He did not feel triumph. He felt something quieter, heavier, and strangely clean. For the first time in years, there were no lies pressing against his ribs, no questions nagging at the back of his mind, no need to explain himself to anyone who had already decided what he was worth. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the black notebook. On the first page he had ever written in, the lines still stared up at him in his own handwriting. People change when money leaves the room. Below it, he added one more sentence, the ink fresh and dark. And sometimes, when the truth arrives, you finally remember who you were before they try to price you. He closed the notebook and looked out the window as the city rolled by. The same Austin streets that had once watched him walk home in defeat now watched the car carry him forward. Nothing about the asphalt had changed. Everything else had. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.